Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. It is we who plowed the prairie, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving amid the wonders we have made, but the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no rights. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empire's fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. Some brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The international movement unites the world in song. So comrades and rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred or walls of stone. Come breathe the dawn that stands beside us, live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who will take they must steal, and the end of vanity of nations, the book one of concrete to live. Some brothers and sisters, for the struggle The international knowledge unites the world in song. Song praise God, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama in the streets and in the fields. We stand and bow before their armor. We can fly their guns and shields. When we fight from whatever aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. Although they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. Some will come, all the struggle that is on. The international knowledge unites the world in song. For this is the time and place.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. It is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving amid the wonders we have made, but the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, but without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
Siku moja moja ukipata nafasi tukumbukane,
nitalipa bodaboda, achana mwendo kasi, usijibane bane. Ewe binti maringo, sijui wanisikia, pendo lako nicheze bingo, wenda nikajishindia. Mwenzako bado nko singo, pendo limenishatia. Uwezuka niwe tingo, wewe abiria. Nafsi unainyong'onyeza, na isila moyo shambulio, nifanye chipsi chombeza, japo nionje mwenzio, penzi linanilegeza. Sonona eti, lini utapata nafasi? Sonona baby yoyo, nambie basi. Sonona sinyonge, naishi kwa wasiwasi. Sonona beba wangu moyo, mwepesi kakaratasi. Sonona. Mwaga wino wa kalamu ya penzi langu, shimo unizike kabla ya siku yangu. Hakuna sajua matatizo ya moyo ukipenda, unanifanya mwana sesere kunichezesha. Mimuoka macho usoni, sijashikwa na kuipikia masihara. Sema niandae vipopcorn, unyonye na vipipi vya duara. Nafsi unainyong'onyeza, na isila moyo shambulio, nifanye chipsi chombeza, japo unionje mwenzio, penzi linanilegeza. Sonona eti, lini utapata nafasi? Sonona baby yoyo, nambie basi. Sonona sinyonge, naishi kwa wasiwasi. Sonona wangu moyo, mwepesi kakaratasi. Sonona uje baby, uje Mombasa wakuone, uje Tanga, uje Nairobi wakuone, uje baby, uje Dar es Salaam.
Right, so I'd like to start this conversation. I'm sorry we got a bit late. Francis, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
I'm sorry, I've been playing Solidarity, waiting for you, not seeing you.
Yeah, I had some issues with my internet, but now I'm okay.
Oh, okay. No problem. That's okay. You know, today is special day for people like you. So we will really try as much as possible. You will be addressing us. So today is more of you as the union people addressing the workers now. And I hope, is it coincidence that your name is also like the other Francis?
Yeah, it could be a total coincidence, huh? But let's see what the name has to do in terms of protecting the workers and championing their rights moving forward.
Interesting. That's good. All right. So I would like to start this conversation. Basically, if you want to join this conversation tonight, you can easily join the conversation. Just use the link that is on the comment box. Once you hit the link, takes you in, and then we can have this conversation together. Today we are joined by Francis, who is which he will introduce himself. I don't want to put words to his mouth. Maybe, gentlemen, you can first introduce yourself, and then we'll go to this conversation. We can start with Wekesa.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Today is Labor Day, and I want to introduce myself as a worker. Yeah. I'm Wekesa Eric from Machakos. I work with one of the companies in Kenya in sales and marketing.
All right. Now we can go to Alphonse.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Alphonce Were. I'm a trade unionist, I'm a labor activist, I'm a labor policy consultant based in Nairobi.
Awesome. Maybe now, Francis, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Good evening to all of us. My name is Francis Oyondi. I'm a trade unionist as well. So I work for an affiliate of KOTU, which represents workers in the domestic, hotels, education institutions, and hospital. So I'm passionate about social justice, and this is through achieving fair labor practice. Currently, I work as an industrial relations officer based in Kwale County.
Right, good, good. So maybe I can bring Conrad also to introduce himself as we continue.
Okay, I'm Conrad Sanya, joining in from Busia County.
Great, awesome, awesome. Now, maybe the first thing we will want first to talk about is how the situation of COVID-19 affects the labor maybe day and how the labor celebration was, and then we'll go to the details of the conversation. But first, let's share about, we can hear part how the whole landscape was affected and how was it. Maybe we can start with Wekesa.
Yeah, I'm used for Labor Day. I'm used to see first the rehearsals with our able CJ, and then comes the real day when we have all the workers and different companies paraded what they are doing and showcasing what they are doing, and having feedback from different trade unionists, and finally what the union KOTU has for the workers, and what the government has for the workers. But this time it was a summarized meeting in State House. And for us, when we find trade union in State House, we get worried that perhaps the government has swallowed everything.
All right, maybe we can go to Alphonse, you can weigh in. Alphonse, sorry, can you turn on your mic?
I'm saying I feel it's supposed to be Workers' Day when workers are celebrating the achievement they have had in the period preceding that day, that is the previous 1 year, but also making public demand for the state as one of the employers, but also the regulator of the environment of social partnership, so that they rein in to give the benefits that are supposed to be fit the workers. So usually, most of the time in Kenya, we expect minimum wage adjustments to be done that day. We expect also a demand for the lower cadre workers to be set, and what is the percentage, which most of the time also is a leading parameter in CBA negotiations for other organizations and unions that are not necessarily working with the minimum wage at that point. So I expect such things. Now, the difference today was not just the issue to do with the crowd and the invitation of workers themselves to showcase different sectors and what they're doing, but the fact that the environment was not conducive for making demands of for workers to gain gainful benefits from the type of work they do in a day-to-day from all sectors. Instead, it was a rallying call for people to handle the situation that we have at hand with unity and with minimum impact to every social to every social partner, in this case the worker and the employer, to be specific.
All right, good. Maybe now, Francis, you can weigh in.
Yeah, as my colleagues have put it, normally this International Workers' Day, and maybe just to make a slight information to the general public, is that today we are celebrating International Workers' Day and not Labor Day. Those two things are a bit different. They sound the same, but we are celebrating International Workers' Day and not Labor Day. So usually on this day, May the 1st, we expect globally to have workers celebrate the achievements they've made over the years. Of course, we expected, if under ideal situations, we expected to have workers crowding in particular locations and having to celebrate the achievements that they've made. But this year is a bit different. We, as workers, just commemorated the day because, of course, of the existing conditions, which generally have been brought about by COVID-19. So we didn't get that chance of making other gains moving forward in terms of adjusting the minimum wage and bettering the decent work. But still, it's a natural pandemic that we are finding ourselves in. So we'll have to adjust with that mood.
All right, good, good. That's interesting. Conrad, maybe you can weigh in also.
I think I don't have much to add on from what my colleagues have said. This year has been a very different. It's a very different celebration when it comes to Workers' Day because at this stage, at this time, so many people are grappling with unemployment, which has been caused with COVID. So there's not much to celebrate about it because of the uncertainty that is happening currently. And we are seeing the difference more the way social distancing and other preventive measures are affecting our overall normal behavior we are used to. So I think those are the two things I find this year has been it's quite a different thing than the previous year because then it means other things that could normally be agitated at this time can't be agitated properly because of the environment we find ourselves in.
All right. Okay. So maybe Wekesa, maybe I want to come to the specifics of today's International Workers' Day. But before that, let's also go to maybe what the president said in terms of what's happening in our healthcare and also how we revive our economy. Seems the president was so interested so much that we need to open this economy. Maybe you can weigh in. And also now, from maybe a health perspective, there's also some worry in terms of how we prevent maybe the spread of coronavirus.
Yeah, I think different heads of states gave different messages based on what is happening. I saw our friend from Tanzania is an interesting guy. I normally check what he updates. He said that it's important that the economy remains vibrant and productive, even in this season of COVID-19. Hence, he hasn't restricted anything, but has instead asked the workers to double their effort and make sure that they are not tampering with their economic livelihood. For our situation, the president was he was both inspiring and trying to manage fear that quite a number of Kenyans might lose job in tune of millions, and that is a situation that is worrying. He also alluded that the government is aware and it's trying. It has a plan that they are going to maybe have a stimulus package that is going to revive the economy in a number of weeks that are coming. So it's something they are planning to roll out. For us, we can only remain hopeful, assuming that things will go in the right direction. But the challenge is we have had more of verbatim than real practical solutions in this situation since we began March 13 this journey. Most of the things that geared towards interventions have remained in speeches but have not been practically implemented. And so our fears might be that we might be talking about reviving the economy, but just we are only giving Kenyans a lip service type of hope. We need to see a few things rolled out in terms of interventions, which we can see and appreciate that the government is doing and is trying to seal the loopholes that can lead to the economic recess or crunch. I didn't hear the president pronounce himself in terms of if in terms of workers losing their jobs. I think he should have issued a directive that partly, okay, maybe workers may be temporarily suspended from their jobs, but so once the economy stabilizes, they can come back rather than not pronouncing themselves on the plight of workers. There are guys who have lost jobs and they don't know what to do, and the government doesn't seem to connect with them. Yeah, why don't we have something that gives them hope instead of just laying all the workers off? Perhaps even give them a percentage. Maybe there should be pay cuts. There should be discussions of companies with the government on how to handle this situation, rather than just everybody deciding what to do in whichever method they seem best. I also didn't see the Secretary General being pro workers completely, because he looked to be more government and focused on what government even needs to do in terms of its own survival than in terms of workers. He talked more of how KOTU initiated the BBI and how it was the one who are steering national unity. Those who are less of concerns of the workers.
Okay.
Because when people don't have money in the pocket, even if you tell them about what the national government want to achieve, it remain musical chairs.
All right. Good. So maybe I want to bring Conrad. Conrad, can you weigh in on in terms of the president's speech? Conrad.
I think the president's speech is, as I said earlier, I like the way the speech was framed, but what I'm really interested in is the tangible action to foster what he was talking about. Because part of his speech, he talked about if we don't put in the necessary measures, we could lose upwards to, he talked about 500,000, something like that, jobs. 500,000 jobs in the next 6 months. So, what action is the government taking to ensure such job losses are not experienced? What you are seeing is the reverse, actually, because even when they ask hotels to open, the measures that have been put in place are so stringent that most hotels, if they have to abide by the law as they say, cannot do it. So we need to see an equal push by the government to walk the talk, because as I've always said, we need to balance between the medical impact of COVID-19 and the impact and the economic impact that COVID-19 might cause. if we don't balance the two, what can happen is that the economic impact can be very severe than what we are thinking we are trying to contain. Because as he has said, most people depend on these regular hand-to-mouth jobs. Most of them don't have savings, and in an extended setup where we have certain uncertainty concerning this issue, most people run out of savings with the little they have. They run out of option, and no economy can, especially our economy, cannot manage to feed its people if that is what they think they can do. So I think from the speech, I like the way the speech was framed. But my only worry is that it can be a nice speech, it can be a good speech talking about issues that bring hope. But what you are looking at is what are the necessary action that the government is taking to ensure that whatever they are talking about are implemented. That is my only worry. What is our action? What are we doing? And I'm not just interested in cosmetic measure. I'm interested in long-term measures that can address both the economic part of it and the medical part of it. I've been of the opinion since the beginning of this thing that our need to close down our economy was ill-informed, because at the beginning we started in a very correct trajectory. What the CS talked at the beginning was he asked supermarkets to ensure they can open 24/7, so as to ensure people don't try to don't try to overcrowd in such supermarkets looking for goods. They went ahead and instituted other measures like in the transport sector and the rest of the things. I think if we needed to do it and get it right at the beginning, we could have probably tried to experiment something like a 24-hour economy where we ensure that people who can work from home. People who cannot do that and who need to work can work, but in a less crowded environment. And that can only happen if we have extended time so that people can be able to try and observe the necessary preventive measures. But what we took right now, we are still early. We still don't know. The problem with these things that we don't know much information concerning this. What is our trajectory because of the limited data we are gathering as a country. So we can't really tell. But I like just the government to walk the talk. Whatever they are talking about, we should see equal action that are meant to address the things the president talked about. Otherwise, it will just be another good speech with no follow-up action.
All right, good. Thank you for that perspective. And now, maybe Alphonse, I want to come to you, but the president was so specific that we have to be careful for the economy to maybe what we do for the sake of the economy, because maybe in a couple of weeks or months, we might suffer so much. Now, Alphonse, when you are maybe referring to that, you can also maybe weigh in terms of the measures that we already had, if were the right way to go, or actually we should not have gone that same route.
Yeah, what I think is the president is giving us what we call preliminary communication. Yet what he's supposed to have given us is concrete solution that his team has already come up with. Now, what is clear is that president's team is giving me information that is not sufficient for the public communication at that level. And it will be easier for us to therefore fault the president by saying that he didn't give us tangible information, in the sense that you don't tell us you will give people some goodies or some support or some incentives. You give us those incentives in that speech, because we don't expect the president to be talking to us every day. So the other things he is giving us can be told, we can be told by other people. But him as the president, when he comes, he should come with tangible that the workers will feel that our issues have been addressed. For example, when we are talking about the issue of health workers and they are supposed to be motivated, they're supposed maybe to have insurance cover, they're supposed to have, let's say, increased allowances at this risk time or risk-related allowances, then it will be in order. And it was expected that as he comes, he will actually give us those figures, not to tell us that he is going to look into them, or very soon we are going to get information in that regard. So I think the president might be meaning well, but the people who handle how he relays the information does not read the signs of time and are not giving us what we call time utility.
All right, thank you for that. Maybe now I would like to go to Francis. Francis, you say this is an international celebration day. So is there something to celebrate about, especially when it comes to healthcare force, maybe any other from any sector of the economy? Francis, can you unmute your mic? Can you? Okay, good.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. You're asking whether we have anything to celebrate about. Well, basically, at the moment, what I can say is that whatever achievements we would celebrate now are achievements that we've made in the past. Now, to be specific with healthcare workers, at the moment that they were going for 100 days strike, asking for their pay rise in terms of paying equally, in terms of the job that they are doing. Uh, Generally, Kenyans saw them as a nuisance, as these people just want to go to the streets without any justification. But right now, we are seeing the essence of having healthcare workers who are well remunerated and well taken care of in terms of the labor environment. So the achievements that we could be celebrating right now, the achievements that we've made in the past. Now, moving forward, we were expecting so much to celebrate about on this day, but due to this pandemic, things have been a bit slow. So we were expecting at least the president could come out clearly with concrete measures moving forward on how we are going, number one, to recover and even take care of the vulnerable workers. But you will understand that in his speech, it was more of a message of hope to workers. But then the message of hope didn't have any solutions on how the same hope was going to be achieved. Yeah, because already we are seeing the number of the ILO has brought out an estimate number of job losses that we are going to lose due to this pandemic. So what is our recovery strategy moving forward as a country? Okay.
Yeah. All
And
right.
we are saying that all this is happening because of ill preparedness, lack of preparedness. As a country, we ought to have prepared well to handle any sort of pandemic. But the way we are responding right now, we are doing knee-jerk reaction. Okay.
All right. Thank you. So, Wekesa, it seems Francis is coming up with an issue of ill preparedness, but now, and of course, the question about do we have anything to celebrate about? Maybe going forward, do you think workers will have anything to celebrate about? Maybe in a year or 6 months, or any or like a couple of years to come? Wekesa?
I think for our workers to celebrate, it will be upon their own resilience and determination to go through hard times and overcome. Because statistics and chronological events shows that from every year we have had speeches of Labor Day that don't add value to the plight of workers. This year we have a very good, valid reason why we can say that. But COVID can just be another excuse because each and every year we have not been really focusing on the plight of the workers and showing a way out of their challenges by trying to create interventions that improve their livelihood. Even when we talk about the minimum wage increase, most of these have not been in terms of percentage. They are figures, yes, but in terms of the quantity of amount that has been added to somebody's salary, you realize that inflation takes care of every salary increment that we talk about in terms of work pay. So most of the time, the worker doesn't benefit, but is just given hope that things will get better, and we keep hoping. But for me, I will say that workers need to be determined to look beyond what the government can do and create their own environment of financial freedom, because chances and statistics have shown that most people who rely on government end up being enslaved in their life. They don't progress because government, first of all, it takes the lion's share of the profits of the revenues. Then only a few peanuts can be given to, especially the low income earners. I also think that this was the right time the president would have done his tax measures, and done it in a way that it brings at least you can see that there is income that has been generated. Part of the tax reliefs that he did as intervention measures were too minimum to be realized in terms of income. When you look at your pay slip, nothing changes a lot.
All right, interesting. Maybe Conrad, I want to come to you in terms of maybe when the president talked about that there is no country that can succeed without having a good tax regime. But my question is, we have always had a discussion whereby we are saying the more taxes we reduce for startups, maybe for small businesses, the better the revenues we can create for the economy. Maybe what's your perspective in this, and how do we move in that when we are talking about this, the small economy for Kenyans?
I think the major problem the government is facing is that the tax bracket is very, very small. The number of people paying taxes actually in Kenya, like those one filing for returns, are very, very low. Now, the government, on the other hand, instead of trying to look at ways of ensuring like tax compliance is simplified and made it easy for so many other people, they have introduced measures that aim at trying to get maximum returns from the few people who are paying taxes. So they are concentrating their efforts around the few people who are declaring and paying taxes, instead of trying to expand the tax bracket, because there's no way we can be able to ensure that everybody pay his fair share when we can't try to add more people into the tax bracket. So the issue we have currently is trying to overmilk the already low number of people paying taxes. But in a better strategy, the government could look at ways of simplifying, making it easy for people to pay taxes so that the tax bracket can increase. Because currently we have, I think it's 2 million or how many million people paying taxes who are filing returns. That's who are filing returns by KRA. Most of them are in the formal employment. So many others who are receiving some form of income or another are not declaring their sources, because probably the tax regime is not very conducive to them. We were talking about before this corona thing came, there's an issue that was being discussed concerning the turnover tax, which so many people were saying it is not actually pro-business if you look at it in a very detailed perspective. And because Corona came around, I don't know at what stage that legislation is at, or that policy is at. But before then, they were trying to increase the number of people in the tax bracket by introducing something like a turnover tax, which to most people, according to the framing of it, it was charging 3% of your turnover regardless of what you do, could ensure that some business were going out of business because we don't actually know the margins of some of these businesses. Some of these businesses are really rely on very small margins. So I think there's a problem, there's a quite disconnect between what the government wants to do, the policies putting forth to implement that, and the eventual implementation of those policies. Because what they are looking at is increased revenues. How do they do that? Increased. We need to have an increased tax bracket. So many people being under tax bracket. But what happened is that they have failed to get a right formula of increasing the number of Kenyans under the tax bracket. So what do they opt to do? They opt to do a shortcut, increase taxes in people who are already paying taxes. Those people are already overburdened. That's why we have a very unconducive environment when it comes to tax regulation, especially for startups and the rest of the local companies.
All right, thank you, Conrad, for that perspective. Maybe I'll want to bring maybe Francis. Francis, you can explain to us in terms of the status of labor activities in our country, as well as maybe the status of the whole when you're advocating for workers' rights and also workers' welfare, how that landscape is and how you actually maybe negotiate with employers to actually listen to workers.
So the labor movement in Kenya has been active since before even independence. And actually, I normally tell people that the labor movement was at the forefront of fighting for independence of not only Kenya, but many countries in Africa. So what we're experiencing currently in terms of the labor movement in relation with the government and employers is that we've been able to form this tripartite partnership, and we are working together in terms of fostering the rights of workers in Kenya. So, of course, we have the laws that guide each and every step that the labor movement engages in terms of freedom of association, which is also anchored in both the Constitution and in the international labor standards. So we understand that very well. The freedom is a guaranteed freedom, although not absolute, but it's a guaranteed freedom that each and every worker has the right to exercise that freedom at their own will. So what we are having currently is a tripartite relationship, which means that the labor movement in terms of workers, the government through the Ministry of Labor, and the employers through various employers associations have come together to foster these good industrial relations between themselves and other partners that I've already mentioned. So you'll understand that in individual industries countrywide, we we have negotiations at individual industries or sectors in terms of having a particular collective bargaining agreement that then improves on the already given labor laws that we are having. So you'll understand, like, for example, in the hotel sector, they have their own collective bargaining agreement, which they negotiated together with the workers and the employers so as to improve on the already given um, employment laws that we are having in the country. So I can say generally the landscape in terms of the labor movement in Kenya, we are doing quite well. Although there are some points that really we are dragging behind in terms of social protection and social security, but in terms of the employment relations and industrial relations, we are doing well in the continent of Africa. But then moving forward, and this corona pandemic has taught us a lesson, is that the way our social protection and social security system is formulated at the moment, it's not comprehensive, it's not inclusive. So that is the thing that is really dragging the labor movement behind. Because if at all we got these two right at the very beginning, then at this moment we could be even sailing through this pandemic. You realize in Europe, In most European countries at the moment, workers are still receiving their salary. They're not working, yes, but they are receiving their salaries. Why is that? It's because of a proper social security and social protection system that they had put in place from the word go. And if you look at these countries, even in their parliaments and in the government, the labor movement sits in it. Take, for example, the United Kingdom. The opposition party is sponsored by trade unions, by workers. You understand? So you find that the labor movement in Kenya and in Africa, we've not pushed as much as we should in terms of social security and social protection, which are the most important things at this moment. You see, the battles that we've been fighting ever since independence, and also which necessitated the labor movement to aid in the achievement of independence in Africa and in Kenya, we've been pushing for employment relations, whereby you have a letter of appointment, you have your salary given there, and you have your job security guaranteed. But then there is more to that, which I'm mentioning, which I'm calling social protection and social security. So after this pandemic, it's high time the labor movement went back to the drawing board and focused more on these two things, because the things that I'm mentioning, social protection and social security, are now the long-term benefits or goods of you of ordinary worker having to join a trade union. I was having a discussion with a colleague of mine during the day, um, and we were dissecting through the speech of both SG Atwoli and the president. And we are finding the labor movement, because then that is my background, we are finding ourselves in a very tricky situation. Because then after this pandemic, how are we going back to face our members? Because currently we are as helpless as they are. They are going for unpaid leave. Some people are losing their jobs, but there is nothing much we can do. You see, the much we can do is giving hope that in the future things will be okay. But you see, this is not the workers did not join the labor movement for them to get hope. They joined the labor movement for their conditions of work to be improved and to be secured. So moving forward, this is a lesson that really we have gotten to learn, that in terms of preparedness and in terms of things that we front during negotiations and during the social dialogue, that we should move with the current times. We should look at the long-term benefits of labor movement and so forth. Thank you.
That's a very insightful elaboration. Maybe I want to bring Alphonse. Alphonse, maybe I want you to weigh in terms of where the labor movement have been maybe doing well, or what they have been up to, and is it enough for maybe the Kenyan workers?
Yeah, I think one thing that is need to be appreciated is that whether you are in management or not, and you are employed or just normal working, most of the benefits you get have come from organized labor, trade unions most of the time. Now, the only challenge we have is people have never known that trade union movement has been the only movement that has made human beings feel, live, and act like human beings. I want to give an example. Today, we are hearing people talk about they have a salary and they can negotiate a salary. They can know the salary when they're starting at the point of starting employment. Now, these were not normal benefits before. Before, you are supposed to be taken by force, taken to the production process, and just be kept alive. That was enough. It took people to start labor movement, trade union movement, so that they start fighting for their rights, that they have a right in the production process as workers to negotiate their benefits beforehand. So today, when you are getting a salary and you are signing an appointment letter, that's the benefit of the labor movement. So we need to appreciate that. Number two, workers have reached a point where you expect your salary to be increasing. So the salary increments by default, whether negotiated or not, that came out of movement of workers saying that they are entitled to different things that affect their livelihood. So for them to remain with a decent life, then their salaries, their income, their remuneration, their compensation must also be changing equitably upwards as life changes upwards, year in, year out. So I think again that discussion it's from labor movement. Closer to Kenya here, as close as 1970s, women were not having permanent employment for that matter. They could only be given short-term contracts. And if their husbands were married, if they were married, then they could not even be employed. Yeah. So it took the labor movement to actually fight for that space, that these are two different individuals. Their role in the production process is different. You must pay them as human beings and not look at the gender issue, which still is an issue, yes, but it has really been addressed by labor movement, and a lot of steps have been taken. Women getting leave, getting paid leave, going for maternity leave, and even now paternity leave for men. All these are gains that we have gotten from labor movement. Now, labor movement has also fought for the space where you get other allowances, travel allowances or commute allowance. We have house allowances or decent housing for that matter. All these things have been provided by the labor movement. Now, you see people just take it for granted, going to work, want to work 8 hours or 9 hours a day and have to have a rest day within a week, either 1 or 2 days of resting within a week. Now, those were not automatic. People used to work throughout. Now, those have been brought by labor movement. So what are we saying? We are saying that if it were not of labor movement, then we will still be having 100% slavery today at workplace, because slavery was only meant to get people to go and provide for labor cheaply. That means, if possible, with no cost, as long as the labor is forced, is doing what the master wants, and as long as the labor is alive. And labor is not a thing, it is the people. So there's a confusion where some people think that labor is a something. You are the labor. Labor is human beings, and ideally, from an ideal perspective, labor refers to human beings who are productive in the productive systems and processes. And by age, we can define them mainly from 12 years of age to 70 years of age. So those are people who are mainly engaged in labor as a factor of production, but also in definition of labor, there are people who can be allowed to work depending on the circumstances. You can allow people who are below 18 years to work, and it should not be considered as child labor. But those must be special circumstances. They must be given special consideration. It must be approved.
All right. Maybe I want you guys to ask Francis some questions, especially when it comes to other countries. Like if you look at Japan, for example, Japan maternal leave takes a whole year. So how maybe you can ask questions to Francis, and especially this, I want to Francis to address how is Kenya trying to break that gap to try to reach the middle ground, looking at countries like Japan, which has a very good policies in terms of that maternal leave for women.
Yeah, maybe before we ask Francis, maybe Francis talked about social. There were two things he used the word social. One was social protection. So what are these things they're referring to as? Social benefit, social protection, social system, social justice, whatever it is that you are referring to as social, including social partners, maybe just for the sake of all of us to know.
Okay. Maybe I'll take the two as one question, then we'll get to understand as we are moving forward. Let me start with the issue of maternity leave to both women and paternity leave to men. You'll get to understand that in Kenya, we are having currently, we are having 3 months maternity leave for women. We are having 2 weeks paternity leave for men. If you look at the current situation on the ground, you'll get to understand that the 3 months and the 2 weeks are given under ideal situation. That this woman will go to the hospital, get the baby normally, go home, take the baby through the breastfeeding process, and the lady will go back to work. But you and I will agree that in most cases, you'll find that even some women will lose these children before birth, yet they've already taken the maternity leave. So the woman gives birth, or the lady gives birth, then the baby dies. So how is this being protected in the employment laws that we're having right now? The same is not directly expressed in the employment laws that we are having. So it's left for lawyers and trade unionists specifically to address the same cases. But moving forward, as we are championing on matters on social protection and social security, now these are the specific issues that are in these two things that we are calling social protection and social security. Maternity leave and paternity leave, or whether a man and a woman come together to form a family, those are social issues. But you see, these are also workers at specific places of work. So whatever happens at home socially will affect these people at the place of work, which is basically economic. So how are we going to protect these people in their social life so that they become even more productive at their places of work? This is where the social protection and social security comes in. Like, this worker is working for you today because the worker is healthy. The body is able to function well or at its optimum. But what if this person falls sick? Then how are we going to handle this sick worker that we're expecting to work? So because of that, we give this person health insurance. We pay for the NHIF and any other private insurance. Now that it falls under social protection. That this person, the health is being able to be taken care of in terms of the person. If the person falls sick, then the medical expenses can be able to be funded either through uh, government arrangements, which is national health insurance funds, or whether the employer has a private insurance to handle health matters. So you'll find that the scenarios that I've given, they inform how we are taking our social protection and social security systems. That this person might lose their job any given time because of even maybe such a pandemic. Then how are we going to ensure that this person will continue to earn until when they find another job, because some other countries are doing so. So this falls under social security. That how are we going to protect workers after retirement? Because then we don't want someone to retire, then they die 3 years, 4 years after retirement, only because of depression, because then they cannot continue sustaining themselves because the salary has ended. So how is the country or the state going to protect such workers that even after retirement, they'll still be having some funds in their accounts so as to be protected in terms of social security? So those are the two angles of social security and social protection. And as I had mentioned, these are long-term things, because when we are planning for maternity leave, for example, we are not planning for someone who is already pregnant. We are planning in future. Maybe a worker can get pregnant. Then how are we going to take care of their situation together with the gentleman or the man? So, uh, but okay, moving forward, then how the country is trying to find the balance so as to give better social protection and better social security is that, for example, in the issue of maternity leave, now most collective bargaining agreements, we are agreeing that if a lady is going to deliver their baby, we provide for the 3 months which are given by our employment laws, but also you allow the lady to take an extra month in terms of their leave, so that they take a leave of 4 months. But still, in some situations, you'll find that the same is not adequate enough. So also it becomes a challenge to us that moving forward, we should enhance our social protection and social security systems so as to address each and every situation as they come. As I've told you, currently we don't have a specific law that addresses when a lady is in terms of stillbirth and so forth. If a baby dies, are they supposed to come back to work or not? It's left for us to argue it out. But there is no a specific law that directly addresses the same. But then in various collective bargaining agreements, that has been addressed. But what we are looking at as a labor movement is that we not only focus on our membership, but also the entire workforce. Because as Alphonse had explained, is that whatever gains that are made by the labor movement, they affect all workers in terms, for example, now we are advocating for a living wage instead of a minimum wage. You'll get that it's the labor movement which is pushing for a living wage. So once we attain that, the entire workforce in the country, whether they are members of a union or not, they'll benefit from the same. So that is the angle of how we are taking
All right.
things moving.
Good, good. That's
I have a question. I have a question.
all right. Kesa, you can ask your question.
Yeah. How do you want workers to rate you after COVID-19? Because I think most organizations are being rated at this hour. I've seen people make jokes about after COVID-19, where your pastor should not come back to you and pray for you, which means they are rating the church. They are also, so they are making jokes, but the real sense they are rating. It's a time for feedback. How do you want workers to rate you? For example, in this hour, we have not seen real pronouncements in terms of issues related to our worker. For example, if there are people who are still working at this hour, at this time of the epidemic, if I go to work and I fall sick, I contract the epidemic, what are my compensations? Because I'm taken to quarantine and I'm supposed to pay the bill. In this case, is it the government that is supposed to pay for my bills for quarantine? Is it my company which has kept me at work to pay my bills, or is it me as an individual worker to pay? So those are some of the social protections we want to hear, and also when I am quarantined, and for how does we haven't seen the labor movement or the trade unions coming in terms of people who have been agitating for the conditions for the quarantine. And some of these are workers. They found themselves. In fact, let me give you an example. There is increased cases of COVID-19 in Mombasa. And part of it, we were complaining of how workers were being treated at the Likoni ferry. There was a mixing, and part of it is the government was harassing them. So these people are supposed to go to work, yes, but they are also being harassed because they need to obey the hours of curfew, and the employer has not released them early. How do we balance this tricky movement between the government directives and the survival of the worker?
So you are asking how then we would expect as a labor movement to be rated post-corona pandemic?
Yes, because our workers have had challenges, but your voice is almost silent.
It's okay. So, well, in this studio, this is how we would understand it. And I want to explain it in two ways. That in this studio, we would understand that it's unfair for us as workers to judge the labor movement only on the corona pandemic. It would be unfair because then the corona pandemic has been in existence for less than 5 months. But the labor movement across the world has been in existence for centuries. And through the centuries and even the years, we've made great achievements. Even before the first case was pronounced in Kenya, we had made great achievements and we were headed for greatness in terms of how we are able to deliver our services to our membership and workers across. But then here comes the corona pandemic, which we are supposed to respond on. So the worker out there would not understand what I'm saying now, that we've made great achievements all over the years. We've come up with very good clauses in our collective bargaining agreements and all that. We've been able to strengthen our relationship between the government and the employers, they might not be interested to hear about the past that we've done. So what they want to see is that is their job secured after this COVID-19 and all the things that we are mentioning. So I would say that it will be a bit unfair for the labor movement to be judged only on how they have reacted on the COVID-19. The truth of the matter is the labor movement in general, especially in Africa, was not so much prepared to handle such a pandemic. But then moving forward, all these are lessons that we are getting to learn. For example, if in short you are asking whether COVID-19 can be declared as an occupational disease, so far it has not been declared as an occupational disease. But as we see the trends, if a worker has contracted the disease at the place of work, then the OSH and the Occupational Safety and Health Act and both the Workers' Injury Benefit Act addresses such situations. Although it has not been declared as an occupational disease, but if this worker has contracted the disease at the place of work, it will be treated as such. Now, if you go ahead and look at our Public Health Act, it does not pronounce itself clearly on who should pay for the quarantine fee in case such things arises. So we are left to mobilize and to influence the government to settle these bills that might arise in case a worker is quarantined, because then in some you'll agree with me that no one wants to contract these communicable diseases. But then eventually you'll find that workers and even the other citizens, general citizens, they have to contract such diseases. So is it up to the government to pay, or is the worker to pay for themselves? So the Public Health Act is not clear, does not come clear on this. But then it comes as an eye opener that our laws are not so much comprehensive on some of these things. But then moving forward, as I'm saying, it's a lesson that we are learning. And again, you should also understand that our economy is comprised of the informal sector at large. I think it's about 80 to 90%, if I'm not wrong. That is informality. So the way the informal sector behaves and the way the formal sector behaves, it's very different, because then the informal sector, they don't have strict hours of operation. They only close shop when they feel like closing shop. When they feel like now business is going down, it's when they close shop and go back to their households. But normally it's not regulated in terms of working hours and all that, as opposed to formal employment where you can arrange your shifts, that from a particular time to a particular time I'll be at work. You can be able to adjust with the same. The informal sector is not able to do the same. And you'll understand in the situation where the Likoni ferry people were found themselves in. Likoni basically is an informal, number one, is an informal settlement inhabited by informal sector workers. So that's why they were able to be caught outside during the past curfew hours. But again, it was an unprecedented occasion that happened. So both the labor movement was not prepared to be able to address such issues. But then over the time, it has been able to be advocated through the employers that they be releasing their workers at a particular time, so as to enable them get to their households on time. So that one, the labor movement has tried in terms of advocating. So as you heard the Minister for Labor urging the employers to be releasing their staff on time, that was championed by the labor movement. And also, just to make a clarity so that I don't seem to be contradicting myself, I'm mentioning employers. You'll understand that some people, yes, they have the employers, but still they are in the informal sector, in that this person is a casual, and the form of employment they are in, it's not, they are not they are not assured that if they come tomorrow they'll get the same job. In other words, they are casuals, but it's also informal. That even the government statutory reductions in terms of NSSF and NHIF, they are not being remitted by some of these employers. So we are finding ourselves in such a situation.
Good. Thank you. Wekesa, do you have something else?
Yeah, just a quick one. Now, for people who live on the boundaries, have you had cases of workers complaining of cessation challenges, where you live at Makutano and the boundary is at Lukenya, between Nairobi Metropolitan and Machakos? So how have you addressed such issues?
Yes, that one is a very fundamental question, because even myself, I was affected by the same. I work in a different county, but I live in a different county. And so many other workers were affected by the same. Let me speak specifically to what we've done, the labor movement, specifically in the hotel sector. We've been able to talk with both the employers and the government, the Ministry of Security, through their representatives in counties, that these workers be given special permits to cross the counties. You'll understand, for example, in the coast region, if you've been to Kwale and Mombasa, basically they look like it's one county. It's really hard to distinguish the borders. But most workers live in Mombasa, they work in Kwale, or they work in Kwale, they live in Mombasa because of the ferry. So we've been able to get in touch with the security and together with the employers, so as some of these workers who are required to be at work, number one, they're either provided for accommodation at their workplaces, so as they can spend a week, then go back, or if that one is not possible, then they are given special permits to enable them crossover. But that one generally is just on one sector, the hotel sector. I've not been able to see what other sectors have done, but the hotel sector, I understand that is what is being done. You also understand currently we have a minimal number of staff who are going to work in the same sector. So even the movement is limited to the impact of COVID-19.
Yeah,
All right.
maybe just
Okay.
to add. First, thank you very much, my brother Francis. There are several measures in addition. The other one is where employers have decided to get accommodation facilities for the workers who are working, so that instead of crossing over, they are working from and residing closer to their workplace. And that arrangement is also, I know it's also in the hotel industry and a few other industries as well. And also in the agricultural industry, you find that most workers have either to work near the farm where they are supposed to be working from, or in the farm itself, if the farm can accommodate them. But we also have another one where the permits has talked about, instead of the permit allowing you to move every day, I want to give an example of banking sector. One is that people are working in shifts, so shift of 1 or 2 weeks. So these 2 weeks, a group of workers will be working, then the other one will be at home. Then the other one comes back after 2 weeks, and the one that was working goes home. So if you are crossing the border, you get the permit to cross at that time, then you will get another one to cross the other side, and the employer will be involved, and also the security will be allow you that from the employer side, so the employer does that. So I've also seen that happen. You have asked several pertinent questions, whether the issue of judging the work, the unions, just the way you have talked about the church. The challenge is that if you were to look into it critically, the members of the union are least affected. Now, majority of those people you're talking about who are being affected are not members of unions, but they want now the unions to advocate for them directly. Now, union has resources that are limited, and therefore, because of those limited resources, the priority of resources of the union is the owners of those resources who happen to be members. So, when people are told to join unions, majority of people refuse. I have personally organized people, and people want you to take a whole day explaining to them what they already know, and they still refuse. But when a problem comes, they're the first one who want the union now to assist them. I think that is hypocrisy. Sometimes watu wakule ujeuri yao. Let us be honest. You cannot refuse to pay the money to run the union, but then those who pay should now use that money to run your affairs. As much as we will learn to be fair, it is important that people should take responsibility. It is not illegal to join a union. I don't know what makes people think it is illegal, and it is illegal for your employer to stop you from joining a union. So if you have employers stopping people from joining unions, then that's where the problem is. But also, I am aware that our trade union movement, as a movement, let's be honest, it has also let down workers. How? We don't see the union movement vibrantly organizing people with good structures. Actually, in KOTU is an affiliate. KOTU is not a trade union. It's an umbrella of trade unions. Now, in KOTU, we have trade unions, and there are over 40. Majority of Kenyans cannot name 7 or 5 of those unions. Yet, almost in each and every industry, we have a union that represents the workers. Now, most workers don't end up being members of the union, and in some of those industries, they still have to be deducted what we call agency fees, which still allows them to benefit to a limited extent to what unions usually negotiate. Most of the time, they benefit from the packages in terms of if salary is increased, you also get it. Now, I think we must agree that as Kenyans, we are also deciding to be ignorant deliberately. And that ignorance is very costly when it comes to organizing workers. For example, me in the banking sector. Now, all banks are members of Kenya Bankers Association. Now, Kenya Bankers Association, it is the union of the banks or employers. Now, whenever banks want to negotiate with the union of or the employees, it will not go to individual employee. It goes to the trade union. Now, if it goes to the trade union, the people who are not members of that union and are in that bank are likely to be left out in some of those negotiations. Now, if you tell these people to join the union, they will start thinking that they will be sacked. Yet, whether it is the CBA or it is the Labor Relations Act or even the Employment Act, none of this allows discrimination based on membership or non-membership of a union. And that discrimination, whether you are promoting, whether you are hiring, whether you are firing, whether you are giving other benefits, including salary increments or medical. And I've seen organizations where employer has decided management will be given a higher package of, let's say, higher package of medical cover, and the union members are given lower. Yet, the highest benefit, if the union was negotiating, and the employer also had another package for non-union members, the highest package of the two is the package that's adopted for all. And lack of that is discrimination, and that can be taken to the court of law. And therefore, it is not a privilege at that point. One, it's already decided, it is a right that the highest of the two benefits is the one that will apply for all, so that we stop discrimination. Now, these things are usually voiced better when we have people knowing these laws. These laws are online. Majority of our people know how to read. They have smartphones, they have laptops, they have desktops, they go online. But what do they do online? That is where the problem is. You have said that unions have not been voicing their issues. In Mombasa, I remember the dock workers union has even reached a point and said, now, if we are not going to do the following, we will go on strike. We want this place to be secure. And that was after the port was showing indications that there's increased risk to the workers. Yet the workers were being forced just to work normally as if everything was normal. It is until that time that the dock union called for stern action to be taken. If not, then they will take a stern action, and that was to be an industrial action. That's the time we saw now some action starting to be taken. Now, the ferry issue, the ferry we have here is 1989 ferries. They were long gone, considered obsolete. These things are in writing. The problem is that when the members of the public who use these ferries don't listen to union voice, they wait for catastrophe like this, or like the one we had in Mutongwe in 1994. And at the time they say somebody's not talking. I think that is hypocrisy. That is wrong. That is ignorance. When you hear the right voice on time, please respond.
All right, great. So, you have something?
Just a quick one, Alphonse.
Yes.
This case of Camry, Is
Yes.
Dr. Lutomia in any trade union? Or these Camry guys they don't fall under the medical whatever
Now,
field?
Dr. Lutumia is not a medical doctor, but he's a medical practitioner, if I'm not wrong. But he's a laboratory technologist in that line. I think so. Now, your question is whether he's a member of a union or not. I am not
Yes.
sure if he is or he's not. But chances are very high from the structures of union and management and leadership with employers that he was a senior manager, therefore he was not a member of a union. So chances are very high he was not a member of a union. However, he's a member of the profession and they have what we call professional body. And part of what professional bodies should do is to champion for the welfare and professional welfare specifically of their membership. And therefore, I was expecting the professional body to have a voice and to raise the voice. I haven't heard that voice.
Okay.
All right. Maybe I want to bring Conrad to ask a question to Francis.
Okay, my question, I'll just voice, just to amplify what Alphonse was saying. I can testify to that if you are not a member of a union, then a trade union, then your trade union negotiate for a certain deal, you'll be left out. I experienced that some years back as an intern in a certain bank. I saw my colleagues, the bank I was working then, the people are not members of the KBA, and when they negotiate, they do yearly negotiate that increase their salaries, banker salary by 10%. Our banks could not implement that because basically we are not, most of the workers there were not were not members of that that negotiated for that deal. So I think that is true. So one thing I just asked to ask Francis is that how do you get your members? Because that one issue that Alphonse has raised is that if you are not a member, but the issue people are asking, how do you become a member of a union like you as the KUDHEIHA?
Okay. Trade unions are built on membership, in that it's members who form up the trade union. There is no trade union without members. And for any achievement that is being made, it's made for the members who have contributed resources towards achieving the same cause. But again, the labor movement is not built on this mean spirit. We extend our benefits even to non-members, so long as they uh, they they implement some of the things that we are saying in terms of what Alphonse was saying in terms of paying even agency fee. But then to the main question is that how do we see that we get our members? So we have some strategies that we use. Number one, we do what we call door-to-door recruitment. By door-to-door recruitment, I mean at the workplace, not at private residence. We do door-to-door recruitment at the workplace of our members. And also, when those members get to join various unions of their choice, once they see the benefits that the labor movement brings forth, they also sell the name of the union to other people. So you'll find that some other people just come to join the unions because of the testimonies that they've had from people who have been able to benefit from trade unions. But also, we work with our international partners to do, I wouldn't call it advertisement per se, but maybe advocacy. Let me use the word advocacy. We do advocacy, and through that, workers are able to see that trade unions are alive. For example, in the recent International Youth Day for 2019, the labor movement in Kenya through KOTU had a countrywide advocacy on how people can join trade unions and what they stand to benefit if they join a trade union. So we did door-to-door visits all over the country, from one industry to another. So workers got to know that KOTU exists and all that. So we use different strategies, door to door, also referrals, that people who have already benefited from the labor movement, they sell our name to other workers and they are able to join. We also use social media to get our members to join trade unions, various trade unions in Kenya. So there are several strategies that we use, but we encourage workers in all sectors to at least be a member of a particular union so as to benefit even more, yeah, from what unions advocate countrywide.
All right,
Yeah,
good.
maybe just something.
Mm.
Yeah.
What how to get members is simple. It's just recruiting members. Now the rest is strategies of recruitment. I think that's what Francis is talking about. Some have worked, some have not worked. Now, what is very clear in the market, number one, is that there is an uphill task on attitudes of members of the public to join unions. And that has given it easier just to use internal hidden intimidation mechanisms by employers to ensure that you don't join the union. Because when you join the union, you get more benefits. And you see, more benefits simply means the employer will pay more. For example, when I was in the bank, I remember I told the fixed term contract workers that they should join the union. And when they joined, the salary change was 89% salary change at that point. So you can imagine how much they were earning. And that was not increment. It was just to put you to where you're supposed to be earning, starting point. Yeah. Now, the issues that have been set in law also that unions use mostly is Employment Act and Labor Relations Act. And usually is the basic minimum that you don't go below. I was mentioning an issue to do with maternity. I remember my employer, when we had the 3 months, so the question was, I actually asked it as a union leader, how do we give 3 months to somebody who is supposed to breastfeed for 6 months exclusively? So how will you exclusively breastfeed for 6 months? Do you consider expressing milk also as part of exclusive breastfeeding? And the answer is no. Now, if we don't understand the basis behind which we are informing that policy, then we may not achieve it. Now, my employer then we agitated we requested and asked for 6 months maternity leave. We got 5 months in Kenya, not outside the country. So it is there to date. So we told our members, in the meantime, you can benefit for the 5 months, add your 1 month of annual leave so that it gets to 6 months in the meantime. But we'll see, because the two are supposed to be separated. Not long ago, EABL was also saying that from July last year, they were starting to give 6 months maternity leave. Now, this maternity leave is only given once we know the process of production will wear out the current workforce. And once the current workforce has been worn out, either through death, old age, disability, and such, then we will need a new blood or a new crop of people to continue that production and increase it. Now, that is called reproduction of labor. Now, for us to have good reproduction of labor that will take labor to another level and productivity to another level, then we must take care of the newborns. So that newborn, the mother is the key pillar of that newborn becoming a better productive person in the future. And therefore, the first 6 months scientifically of that person are very important in their coming growth beyond the 6 months, whether it is how they resist the diseases, how they become, how they stand up and start growing faster or such and get to the milestones. Yeah, so our union movement of late has had a weakness, and the weakness is that they're not using expert teams to do expert work. So we have a very possibly strong and viable political aspects of the union within the union systems, but we don't have expertise in other areas that we need to have that will inform negotiations when you're going to have negotiations. Now, you asked a question about Japan. Japan looks like it is thriving, but the biggest problem in Japan is what we call splintering of unions and workers' capability to negotiate together. Now, what that did is that it allowed organizations to start competing on cutting cost of workers. Now, after some time, when everybody else in economic front is fighting inflation, Japan up to date, they are fighting deflation. Deflation is where the inflation is negative. Now, deflation from economics perspective is harder to fight than to fight inflation. It's healthy to have inflation up to a certain rate, because then you can manage a lot of things. And it is very difficult and very unhealthy economically to have deflation. And that's what Japan is currently fighting. So there's a lot in that space that I think we need to bring Francis and a few other of his counterparts and a few technical people who can help us understand why unions do things the way they do, what they have succeeded in, and what they can do better.
All right, good, good. Conrad, do you have any other follow-up before I ask Francis another question?
I think on the Alphonse just mentioned a question on the splintering of unions, and we are seeing the same thing happening. I think in our in our teachers union NAT and the rest of the things, the way things are going, they are trying to create, I think, competing unions, trying to negotiate, each trying to box each other for members. So how do such affect the bargaining power? Because you have already seen that previously, before then, that some teachers were awarded, some unionized teacher were awarded some certain amount, then the rest were told because they are not part of the deal, they are not able to be awarded the same thing. So how is the unions ensuring that they don't start in fighting that go against the tenets of protecting or advancing the workers' cause?
We are in a greedy country, so I don't think there's anything much the unions are doing, because what happens is that there's a lot of people being bought. Now, when union leaders are bought, when union leaders are compromised, then they stop negotiating for the union members. They start thinking about their personal welfare. And that is common, not just in Kenya. I can confirm in the entire union movement worldwide. I've seen it serious. It is more serious in India than any other place I've seen. But in Africa, it is very clear that also a lot of compromise has been done and has happened in our movement. Now, that has weakened how trade unions operate and their strength. This was a strategy that was brought in by what the economic policies referred to as post-Washington consensus, which came on board from around 97, 98, and they were replacing Washington consensus, which were there from 1989, which were replacing structural adjustment programs, which I know that one most of us have come across. And this is the IMF, World Bank, US, UK strategy towards the countries they want to colonize economically, so that their main problem was they wanted something they call laissez-faire in the economy, that is a willing buyer, willing seller, as the way to sell their ideologies so that they can control the economies. And as a result, the problem was the economies that had strong union movements, those movements had agitated for what we call regulations or controls or protectionism, so that even if you are to come to the market, there are conditions you must meet. But now, most of our governments, including Kenyan government, I can authoritatively speak and say that they have acquired loans and other international economic benefits with accepting some specific trade agreements with countries like China, US, UK, and even Japan through, I think, JICA, that they will not disclose some of the information to the public. And if they disclose, then they will compensate those countries any negative impact to the projected profit that those countries were projecting to make in that agreement. For example, the agreement between Kenya and China on the railway can never be disclosed, ideally speaking, from what I'm saying, so that the Chinese government agreement, they get what they wanted to get from that agreement if they build the standard gauge railway. Now, even if the union movement was to make a lot of noise in that and around the workers there, they will be ignored. And that ignoring will come from the top. Now, what workers need to do is to own their unions, to stop any individual or a smaller group of individuals who want to take over their union. How do they do this? Members should demand accountability in their unions, which they are not doing. They want somebody to come from heaven and save them. Members should accept that the unions are run by members, and therefore ask in my union, what are the right questions to ask? Am I in a branch? What is happening in my branch? In this branch of my union, how do we run affairs in this branch? Because as Francis is saying that he's a member of a union, the union he belongs to has a headquarters somewhere, has branches, and he most likely where he is, he belongs to a branch. So Is that branch functional? Such are the things. Now, I must also say that the government currently is targeting those unions that are still sounding, behaving, and working strong in one way or the other. And therefore, there are around 6 or 7 unions that still have some capability to negotiate for their workers loudly and strongly. Now, NAT happened to be one of them. Now, KUPPET was generally raised on board because of that when you listen to the history. But as it stands, a lot of what has happened with the teaching fraternity is against the law, and that has been done by TSC itself against several court rulings that they have not worked for. And most of the things they are doing is just to ensure they weaken NAT deliberately, but not that they're following any law. They're doing a lot of things unlawfully, which is not good. And in such situation, workers need to rise up and say, demand for their justice, or down their tools. It's part of what they should do to force the employer to follow the law.
All right. Thank you for that. I want maybe Francis to address one issue, and then we can come to a conclusion, to parting shots. Francis, maybe you can address the issue about when it comes to Kenya, where we have small businesses or mama bogas, those people who come from the lowest of our economy. These people don't actually maybe belong to any union. How are you working to ensure those people maybe have a union, or how they can actually come together and form a certain union that works for their cluster?
Okay, basically what you're asking about is how to formalize the informal sector. Now you understand that the people that you've just mentioned, the mama mboga, watu wa kiosk, people who are preparing chapati mlango kubwa pale, these are people who are, yes, self-employed, but again they fall under the informal sector or the informal security in the economy. So basically what you're asking is that how then is the labor movement trying to see that these people these people transform from the informal sector to the formal sector so that they can be able to join a trade union. You'll understand that for trade unions to recruit members, we must be having the employer-employee relationship in place, in that an employee can be able to point out that indeed this person here is my employer, I work for him or her, then they pay me my money. You'll understand in informal sector, those people, they employ themselves. Mama Mboga, the kiosk, it's hers. So then if you go to recruit this person to join a trade union, they'll ask you, so will you be negotiating with me so as to see how I'm going to pay my own salary? Then it doesn't make sense on that. But then the labor movement has been innovative enough to see that, yes, as much as you are in the informal sector, you are self-employed, yes, but there are things that the labor movement can do so as to secure your form of employment in terms of job or in terms of social security and social protection. Those are the key things that currently the labor movement is doing. In that you've seen we've been able to open up both NSSF and NHIF, that people can be able to pay their own funds to those insurance. Like a boda boda person can pay 500 shillings for the NHIF. You see, a boda boda person is in the informal sector, and if this person is able to pay 500 per month for their own national health insurance fund, then at least they are socially protected in some sort. But then this alone is not enough moving forward. The labor movement still is going ahead to put these people in one association, the people who work in the informal sector. For example, the people who sell vegetables, the people who sell mitumba in town, and telling them, yes, you can form an association or you can come together as informal sector people. Then unions will help you negotiate with government in terms of places of working. You see, most of the times the Nairobi City Council askaris chasing hawkers on the streets. So these are, or even in Kamkunji, you find that the roads that lead to some of these workplaces where these people are selling their products, they are not well done. So The trade unions, what we are doing currently is that we are coming to recruit these people into one formidable association and to let them know that if we are many of us, we then form a strong basis on how to negotiate with government to either construct roads that leads to our businesses, at least amend some laws in terms of NHIF and NSSF. You see some of those things in terms of finding their places of trade, in their relation between themselves and even the county askaris. You understand? Because then the people who sell those clothes on the streets of Nairobi, you see, they're engaging in an economic activity that they want to earn something for their families. So for them to get a place to do the job that they're doing really adds a lot to their even decent well-being as humans. So those are some of the things that trade unions are doing currently. But in the bigger picture or in the long-term achievements, we are working towards transforming the informal sector to become a formal sector so that these people can be able to have their medical insurance paid, their NSSF paid, and we are engaging with government that we are telling the government, if you are able to create an environment where these people will come into the formal economy, then it means even your tax bracket will expand. Because how is Mamboga being taxed right now? How is she submitting her returns to the KRA? It's impossible because number one, the government does not recognize this person as a worker. Yeah. So, but what we are saying is that we are advocating for government to come up with strategies, and we are working together with the International Labour Organization and other bodies to see how we can transform slowly by slowly these informal sector workers to the formal economy, so as also to extend the tax bracket for the government and to have a more decent working environment for these workers.
All right, that's an elaborate, very good, insightful elaboration. So anyway, I want to go to Conrad. Conrad, we want to have your parting shots. Maybe we do Conrad, then we go to Alphonse, and then we finish with Francis, and then we wind up this session.
I think just like to thank Francis for creating time to talk to us about the labor movement in general, and also Alphonse for his insight concerning the same. Today being the Workers' Day, we know we are facing very many challenges brought about by COVID-19. Some of them cannot be controlled by anybody. Even the unions themselves, they can't really control some of the things that are happening. And what I'll just wish to say during this Workers' Day is that the way out of this is that we need to find a certain balance between our economy and the health impact of COVID-19. And that we do when we get the necessary data that can help us make informed decisions. So anything short of that,
All right, Conrad. Right, sorry, it seems we lost Conrad. So maybe Alphonse, you can go ahead and weigh in terms of your parting shot.
I'm grateful first to Francis for giving us the great insights and creating time for our viewers and listeners, even for the many questions we have asked him. But I think he today. I don't know whether he was lucky or not lucky. The listeners did not ask him many questions, because sometimes I see the viewers asking you so many questions in the show. Yeah, but I think you are giving some concrete information that we need to chew and just have moment of digestion. And I have no doubt that Patrick will invite you to the show again for more, because you are very insightful. I have gone through your works, Francis, including your writings. You are doing a good job. Keep it up. Personally, I'll commit that I'll see how best we can create platforms for people who have knowledge in their area of expertise, particularly labor like you, to get that out there. And it's a matter of time. In the next decade, you will not be a force to reckon. You'll be a force of reference because you'll be such a great person and a voice. You're going to become definitely an authority, and therefore do what you're doing, run with it. Don't be intimidated. Don't be scared. Life is full of moments like those ones, but also those are the moments that make people champions. So thank you so much for creating time for us. My very last one is we dedicate this for our frontline healthcare workers and other workers who are in the front line, including those who are doing logistics, transport, supplies, and distribution of food and other essentials, emergencies and all that. They are doing a good job, and we can't thank you more. We don't have what to give you, but we pray that may you be safe, may you do it, may God reward you and bless you. And thank you so much. So thank you, Francis. Thank you, Patrick, for hosting us in the show, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very good parting shot. I think I didn't get Conrad to finish his parting shot. Maybe Conrad, can you finish your parting shot? I'm sorry, your network was so bad. Conrad, can you finish, and then we'll go to Francis to take us home. Are you there, Conrad? All right. So anyway, so it seems Conrad won't make his parting shot. So maybe Francis, first I would like maybe to thank you very much. Now please make your parting shots.
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, Alphonse, we are in the same trade, but thank you for your usual support. I really appreciate that. So, I'll be very brief, but on from two ends. Number one, I want to encourage workers, each and every worker. I want to encourage them that they should be able to um, learn more about trade unions, what trade unions have done, and the importance of one joining a trade union. Uh, if not about trade unions, then I want also to encourage them at least to go through the labor laws so that they get information on what the labor laws guarantees for them and what goodies are there for them, because the workers can only be denied their rights when they are not aware of the same. So it's very important, especially for young workers, which form the bigger percentage of our workforce in the country, that young workers should it's okay to chase money and all that, but again, it's good at least you go back and see like what then does the law of this country guarantee for me as a worker and especially a young worker. It's important for people to do the same. Then it's important also for them to join a trade union, because we join trade unions because of the future. We don't know what happens in the future in terms of our job security and so forth. So it's important for us to be protected. Back to the labor movement and the government, this pandemic comes as a wake-up call to all of us. In countries like Japan, they're used to pandemics. For them, earthquakes happen each now and then. But for us in Africa, we are favored. Apart from few countries which have war, generally you can say Africa is a peaceful continent. We don't have such crucial pandemics that happen to us. So I think because of that, we've relaxed. We don't even think of the future. We think like we are safe. So we don't come up with policies to address such emergencies. So I want to encourage labor movement practitioners and also the government that let this be as a learning lesson. That in true sense, this is not the last one that we experiencing. In future, 10 years to come, 20 years, 100 years, you never know, we might be having something bigger than this. Then are we going to be facing the same problems of people losing jobs that we are doing right now, or we shall have prepared enough so as to cater for such in eventualities? So moving forward, as people who work in the labor movement, it's time for us to burn our midnight oil to see that we come up with proper policies that guide some of these things. I like to share, for example, as people are going for unpaid leave, for example, and this is a parting shot, as people are going for the unpaid leave, you're forgetting that these businesses have been making profit for the last 20, 30 years. You understand? So
Yeah.
then, what is the work of that profit that they've been making? if they cannot share with the workers that have created that profit during such pandemic. So then moving forward in terms of having our social protection system, we should also think then, if you're having a social protection system, then who are the people who are supposed to pay for that social protection system? A company makes, last day we got a company making 74 billion Kenya shillings in terms of profit. You understand? So then moving forward, how is this 74 billion going to be shared among these workers to compensate for their effort and also to protect them in case of future eventualities? So that is a ground that I'm leaving both the labor movement and the government to see how we are going to save the country in future pandemics. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Francis. I think we'll reach out to you maybe in a week's time or two when we open this economy, or I hope when we end these restrictions in Nairobi and Mombasa and other places, to talk about maybe after we go back to work, what we will be looking at and what kind of welfare we can be advocating for, both for the employer and as well as the employee, right? So I think we'll be looking for you for that. Huh? So thank you everyone who joined this session. So maybe see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we have another session, different time at 11 p.m. So I look forward maybe to see you that, I'm sorry, 11 a.m. in the morning, where we'll be hosting Stuart from Australia, who is looking to do a national campaign on sanitation and hygiene in Kenya. So good night, everyone, and see you tomorrow, 11 a.m., not our usual 8 p.m. Right, good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Siku moja ukipata nafasi tukumbukane, nitalipa boda, achana mwendo kasi usijivane bane. Ewe binti maringo, sijui wanisikia, pendo lako nicheze bingo, wenda nikajishindia. Mwenzako bado mko singo, pendo limenichachia. Uwezuka niwe tingo, moyo iwe abiria. Nafsi unainyong'onyeza, na isi lango shambulio, nifanye chipsi chombeza, japo nionje mwenzio, penzi linanilegeza. Sonona eti, ili utapata nafasi. Sonona yoyo, nambie basi. Sonona sinyonge, naishi kwa wasiwasi. Sonona beba wangu moyo, mwepesi kakaratasi. Sonona. Mwaga wino wa kalamu ya penzi langu, shimo unizike kabla ya siku yangu. Hakuna sejua matatizo ya moyo ukipenda, unanifanya mwana sesere kunichezesha. Nimuoka macho usoni, sijashikwa na kuiku kimasiara. Sema niandae vipopcorn, unyonye na vipipi vya duara. Nafsi unainyong'onyeza, na isi la moyo shambulio, nifanye chipsi chombeza, japo unionje mwenzio, penzi linanilegeza. Sonona eti, ili utapata nafasi. Sonona baby yoyo, nambie basi. Sonona sinyonge, naishi kwa wasiwasi. Sonona wangu moyo, mwepesi kakaratasi. Sonona uje baby, uje Mombasa wakuone, uje Tanga, uje Nairobi wakuone, uje baby, uje Dar es Salaam wakuone, uje baby, 001 wakuone.